Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
It's our TOEIC unit for the month of November, and we're going to be talking about something called a performance review. We've got an article about this topic today, and then in our next program tomorrow, we're going to listen to an actual performance review in the form of a conversation.
Yeah, if you work for a company and you're a full-time employee, you've probably been through some of these performance reviews. In my last company where I worked in America, we had performance reviews that we wrote on ourselves. So I was asked to write up a performance review on myself, and then my boss would also, they would take that performance review and then give their feedback on it and write another one that was the final one that went to the company. And it was based on that, whether we got a raise or not, or a bonus. We had a big bonus system in my last company. So, yeah. Have you done a performance review before, Tom?
Well, I've never had one of those professional full-time office jobs working for a company, a trading company or something like that. But here in Taiwan, I did work as an English editor for a company for a while. And yes, they did have a performance review. After 3 months or so or something like that. And I must say I passed with flying colors. Everybody loved me at that company. I had a lot of fun with those people. It was great teaching them English and editing their stuff, etc., etc. But that was years ago. And of course, we've got some people who are entering the job market, and you're going to come across this if you are getting professional jobs. I don't think you're going to get this if you work as a dishwasher someplace. They'll either like you or they'll fire you if you don't keep up with the dishes. But yeah, if it's a professional job, you can expect to go through this. And yes, we're going to tell you how to do it in English, or at least give you some idea about how it's done in English. So let's get to it. Let's read through the entire contents of our lesson right now. Performance reviews are an excellent way to give workers feedback on their job performance. During these meetings, managers meet privately with employees to discuss their strengths and weaknesses and make suggestions about how they can improve. Managers may also help their employees set goals to focus on going forward. Traditionally, corporations have scheduled annual or quarterly performance reviews. However, many organizations are now switching to more frequent and more casual reviews to make these meetings less stressful and more productive for workers. As an employee, there are several steps you can take to make performance reviews more rewarding and enjoyable. For starters, make an effort to understand your company's review process. You can do this by asking the Human Resources Department for more information. You may also consider keeping a work journal. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. A diary or bullet list of the things you've accomplished each day should suffice. Sometimes, it can help to do your own self-assessment. Create a list of your job responsibilities and grade yourself honestly on your overall performance. When you've finished doing this, jot down some goals that you plan to accomplish in the upcoming year. In many performance reviews, employees are asked to provide their superiors with some feedback as well. So the final step is to think about what comments you will give to your supervisor. If you have any complaints, be sure to express them constructively so your remarks are not offensive.
Let's dive in, guys. 10 tips for excelling at performance reviews. If you excel at something, you do very, very well. You're exceptionally good at something or proficient at something. Sometimes it's a natural gift or talent that you have. Some of you really excel at math. And others out there, maybe you have to work a little harder, do some more homework before you can excel in a particular subject. But it's great to hear that people are excelling at things that they're pursuing in their lives. So we've got some tips, some advice for excelling at performance reviews now.
Okay, so that's the title here, Tips for Excelling. And excelling, of course, is from the verb to excel, which means to do really well. So, of course, you want to do really well at a performance review. You want to excel. I think that's also the name of a software program, right? Excel. Is that is that some kind of, what is that, a calculation program or something like that?
It's a database program, actually.
Okay, database.
Yeah,
yes.
Excel. You'll also hear Excel, Microsoft. Yeah, so performance reviews are an excellent way to give workers feedback. Feedback is, how do we describe feedback? Feedback is just reactions that you get from somebody. A lot of times at work, you'll be given feedback from your boss. Please, guys, do not use this as a verb. I've heard people say, I want to feedback you, or I want to feedback him. No. Ooh. You give somebody some feedback. We don't ever use it as a verb, and it's also non-count, so don't put an S on it either. So notice here in our sentence, we use give workers feedback on the job. So just kind of reactions that you get from your boss or maybe a client or a customer about how things went. Feedback's important for us if we want to improve.
Indeed, and again, those are comments. It's reactions from people. And also, if you talk about feedback with microphones, if you have a microphone and you put it too close to the speaker, you start getting this loud sound coming from the speaker. Well, that is feedback. Again, that is a non-count noun. But here we're talking about information that people tell you about something in reaction to what you've done. Feedback, okay? So you want feedback from your clients. You want feedback from your supervisor, etc. Now, during these meetings, managers meet privately with employees to discuss their strengths and weaknesses and make suggestions about how they can improve. So that's what happens during these meetings, during these performance reviews. Okay, so we've got managers there. It won't necessarily be the boss. It will be managers of different departments and stuff. And they will meet with you privately. Okay, so you'll go into someone's office there. So you'll probably get a little nervous there because you're meeting with your manager. You might think you've done something wrong or something like that. Or you're afraid they're going to tell you some bad news. Hey, we've checked over your work performance and we've decided that you're just not suitable to keep working here. You know, you might be afraid to hear something like that.
Performance reviews can be really scary, to be honest. And as a boss, they're not very fun to do either. They're not fun for either the person receiving the feedback or the person giving it a lot of times. Even for really good workers, for performance reviews, your boss has to come up with something that he can say or she can say to help you improve. So they're going to talk about your strengths, your good points and your weaknesses where you're not so good and can make improvements. And they'll also make suggestions about how you can improve. So managers may also help their employees set goals to focus on going forward. That was a big part of writing a performance review for me is I had to come up with goals for the future where they needed to work. And if they accomplished those goals, they would get their bonus for that year. So traditionally, corporations or big companies have scheduled annual or quarterly performance reviews. I always had an annual review, not a quarterly, but quarterly would probably be less stressful, probably. And if you're really helping someone new, especially, or training somebody in a particular job, having more frequent reviews might help them a lot more.
Right, so a quarterly review would take place, every 3 months or so? Mm-hmm. Every quarter. So yes, that would be more frequent, whereas an annual review would occur once a year, okay? So again, that's up to the company to decide how they want to conduct these performance reviews. However, many organizations are now switching to more frequent and more casual reviews to make these meetings less stressful and more productive for workers. So yes, indeed, they probably realize that these meetings can be quite stressful for both the person giving the performance review and for the person receiving the feedback and receiving criticism and stuff like that. So they've decided to make them more frequent, maybe once a month or something like that?
Oh, I think the quarterly would be the frequent.
Okay.
Yeah, the less frequent would be the annual. If you had a performance review every month, I think I'd leave that company. That's a little too often. However, it says many organizations are now switching to more frequent and more casual reviews to make these meetings less stressful and more productive for workers. Yeah, the less stress you have in your life, the better. We're all going to be stressed at some point, but we know it's not healthy if you're too stressed, so work on reducing the stress in your life. Now, moving on to the next paragraph, it says as an employee, there are several steps you take to make performance reviews more rewarding and enjoyable. There are some steps you can take. It doesn't have to be horrible and scary and something that makes your stomach hurt when you think about a performance review. So if it's rewarding, it's something that provides a lot of satisfaction and good feelings in yourself. It's gratifying, you could say. If you have work that's rewarding, it's work that you do that makes you feel good about yourself and about life. Not all the jobs we have in this life are rewarding, but if you can get a rewarding job, it will make your overall life a lot happier.
Right, it can be rewarding indeed, and of course you might want to make some preparations. Of course, try to remember all the good things that you've done, and then remember maybe some place where you screwed up or something like that. That will probably come up during the performance review, so be prepared to explain yourself there. You don't want to make excuses, but of course you do want to be ready if that does come up. But yes, hopefully this can actually be beneficial to all parties involved, the supervisor and the employee. You want it to be rewarding, to get something out of it, and then you can move forward and perform better on your job and have an even better performance review next time. So here are some suggestions that we have. For starters, make an effort to understand your company's review process. So maybe you can talk to other people who've been through this and try to understand exactly how the company conducts these performance reviews, because every company is going to be different.
Yeah, you can do this by asking the Human Resources Department for more information. They, of course, will have the most information. If you're with a really small company, you may not have a formal performance review system. So maybe talking to your supervisor a bit will be helpful there. There are some companies that, if they're big enough, or maybe even sophisticated enough, they will have online performance reviews. We started doing something called 360 reviews, where it wasn't just your supervisor giving you feedback, but you were giving your supervisor feedback too, which I thought was very interesting and kind of helpful to everyone. So it wasn't just coming from the top down. Those that were in lower levels were also giving feedback to those in leadership positions. So that's one thing you can do, is go to your supervisor, your human resources department for more information. And as Tom mentioned, you could keep a work journal. Just jot down or write down the things that you've done well, or maybe some things that you need to improve on yourself, so it's not so hard at the end of the quarter or at the end of the year to write something up to give to your boss. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. A diary or bullet list of things you've accomplished each day or even each week or month should suffice. Suffice just means should be enough.
Right, and I don't think you want to make it too complicated. Don't write down something like, today I took coffee into the meeting today. That was a good thing that I did. That probably doesn't count as something good that you've accomplished. You want to list things like, today, I got a new account for the company or something like that. Or I explained something to the client and they weren't angry anymore and they decided to renew their contract or something like that. Those are important things, but again, you want to keep that work journal, kind of like a diary, and sometimes it can help to do your own self-assessment. So do it yourself. Maybe write down something, write up a paper for yourself, how that performance review would look like on paper. Yes, that's self-assessment, assessing yourself, looking at your own strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, you judge your own work or your progress when you do a self-assessment. self-assessments are good in life generally, not just for performance reviews. Maybe you can sit down every once in a while and just think about how life has been going for you the past couple of months or so and see where you can make changes. Those are self-assessments where you look at your own life. And maybe there's some friends you trust or coworkers you trust who could give you some feedback as well. That's always helpful. So those are some tips. Create a list of your job responsibilities and grade yourself honestly on your overall performance. I've seen some performance reviews where you're actually given a letter grade like A, A-, B, B+, things like that. I think we used a number system to 100 if I am recalling correctly. And so someone might get a 96 or an 88, and that would be just a way for the CEO or for the management of that company to look quickly and see how someone was doing. Moving on to the final paragraph. When you finish doing this, jot down some goals that you plan to accomplish in the upcoming year. That's really important to do. I used that phrase, jot down, just earlier, didn't I? Jot down. We use it if we're just going to scribble a quick note. Nowadays, a lot of people are writing notes on their smartphones, right? Because it's in their hand or on their tablets. But to jot down just means to write a quick note, to jot down.
Yes, and it's going to be words. It's not going to be little pictures. If you're drawing little pictures, caricatures of your boss or something, those would be doodles. You might be doodling during the meeting, but you don't want to get caught because that's probably pretty unprofessional. But again, jot down some goals that you plan to accomplish in the upcoming year, in the year ahead. And in many performance reviews, employees are asked to provide their supervisors with some feedback as well. That makes sense. The supervisor, of course, is going to be analyzing you and to see how well you've done. But the supervisors also want to know if what they're doing is having any effect on the company's success also. So they could ask, what do you think of my job as supervisor? Oh, you're really good at it. You're really friendly. You're really professional. No, what do you really think? Well, I think you favor some people over others. I suppose you could get away with saying that during such a meeting.
Now, a supervisor is just somebody who manages the work of other people that are on a lower level. So they observe and they direct the tasks that people have been assigned. And they judge whether you need to do something differently or whether something needs to change. Your supervisor. You could also say your manager. I never really had a supervisor, but I had a manager throughout all my work life. I've had a lot of jobs. So if you have any complaints, be sure to express them constructively so your remarks are not offensive. Yeah, that's pretty important. Constructive. If something's constructive, it means it's positive. It helps somebody improve or build. Look at that word. You can see the word construction in there, or construct, which means to build something, right? So if your criticism or your feedback is constructive, the adjective form, it means that it's helping somebody improve. It's positive. They're not going away thinking, oh, I'm a loser. I'm terrible. That's destructive criticism, and you don't want that. You want things to be positive. Remarks is just another word for comments. So if you have some remarks that you want to share with someone, you just tell them what you think. You have some comments.
And we have some comments and remarks from our Chinese teacher now, so let's listen.
大家好，我是派老师。今天讲解的是11月份课程 Unit 10 Tips for Excelling at Performance Reviews。这个单元有2天的课程，帮助大家进一步了解多益测验。第一天是一篇250字左右的文章，介绍 Performance Review 绩效考核。绩效考核到底是什么？绩效考核到底要怎么做才会有效又身心愉快？好，我们一起看看文章内容有哪些学习重点吧。请同学看到第一段，第一句 Performance reviews are an excellent way to give workers feedback on their job performance。请同学特别注意这个 feedback， 这个字的意思就是反馈。等于你做了某一件事情，有一些工作表现，别人告诉你你哪里做得好，哪里做得不好，这就是 feedback。后面的介系词我们用 on， 针对他们的工作表现提供反馈的意见。接下来第二句，我们看到To discuss their strengths and weaknesses， 请同学特别注意这里的 strengths and weaknesses， 就是我们所说的哪里做得好，哪里做得不好，优点是什么，缺点是什么，强处是什么，弱点又是什么。好，接下来我们看到第三句，就是后面的 going forward， 从此之后就是等于是经理人呢会帮员工做绩效考核，方便他们设定日后的以后的目标 going forward， 从今以后。那再来请同学看到第五个句子 However, many organizations are now switching to more frequent and more casual reviews。 这个 switching to 其实就是转换的意思。很多公司他们现在在做绩效考核的时候，常常都会变得比较经常做而且呢形式也比较轻松。那我们看到这个句子后面还有一个为什么要这么做呀？最主要是不希望给员工压力太大 less stressful。 那而且他们希望这么做呢，这个考核会比较有成效 more productive 这个形容词也很重要。好，那再来我们请同学看到第二段第一个句子，在句子快结束的地方，就是要让这些绩效考核呢比较 rewarding and enjoyable。 其实 rewarding 我们可以解释成愉快的，令人心满意足的。好，那再来我们请同学往下看，看到说到底有哪些实际的建议可以怎么做。第四个句子 You may also consider keeping a work journal。 那就是我们要接受绩效考核的人，其实自己平常可以做一些记录一些工作日志。OK， work journal 就是工作日志，动词我们用 keep a work journal。 那后面有讲到 It doesn't need to be anything fancy。 OK， 不需要花俏 fancy。 好，再来第五个句子 A diary or bullet list of the things you've accomplished each day should suffice。 这个 suffice 的意思就是足够就是日志的形式就足够了。这第六个句子有一个重点，就是你可以自我评估、自我评量 Do your own self-assessment。 好，再接着呢 Create a list of your job responsibilities and grade yourself honestly on your overall performance。 好，我们看自己可以给自己诚实的打成绩 Grade yourself honestly。 好，诚实的给自己打成绩，针对什么打成绩 On your overall performance， 对自己整体的工作表现来评分。接下来第三段，请看第一句 When you finish doing this, jot down some goals that you plan to accomplish in the upcoming year。 好，我们看到这个 jot down 其实就是 note down， 就是记录笔记记下来。再来我们看第二句 In many performance reviews 这个句子。好 Employees are asked to provide their superiors with some feedback as well。 这个 superiors 好，以及下面第三句的 So the final step is to think about what comments you will give to your supervisor。 这里的 superiors 和后面的 supervisor 基本上都是你的主管上司。再来最后面第四句 If you have any complaints, be sure to express them constructively, so your remarks are not offensive。 那绩效考核常常后面呢，上司有时候会问说，那你对我们有没有什么建议？请记住，如果你真的要提出任何的建议的话，要尽量呢有建设性，而且避免情绪化的用语 Be sure to express them constructively， 就是提供有建设性的意见。 So your remarks， 那一般而言我们常常都是用复数 remarks， 所以你说的话呢不会冒犯到他， offensive 就是冒犯到对方的意思。以上就是我们针对多益课程第一天内容的中文讲解。好，谢谢大家，我们下次见。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, thank you very much for that concise explanation there, dear Chinese teacher. And now we've got some discussion questions in which we are going to discuss the topic for today, which is all about how to excel at performance reviews. So here's the first question. Do you enjoy performance reviews? Why or why not?
I hated them, I'll be honest. I had to write them in my last job, and I decided to leave that job in New York right before I had to write performance reviews because I would spend hours on these performance reviews trying to find the right tone, to say the right things, to encourage people, but also be honest. So no, when I got a performance review, I thought it was interesting to hear what people had to say to me and where they thought I could improve. So I liked getting the feedback, but I hated giving it. What about you, Tom?
Well, like I said, I've only had one performance review, and it was quite positive, so I would say I enjoy them. But I think sometimes you may have a performance review, and you're expecting to be praised. You think the manager or the supervisor is going to say nothing but good things about you, and then you're kind of taken aback. They start saying these things that other people have said about you, and it suddenly seems that the performance review is not so good, and you were expecting to be praised, but instead you're being criticized. And that might happen more often than not because I think people tend to overestimate their abilities. I am no exception. Okay, let's move on now to another question here. Can you give some examples of appropriate feedback that you might give a manager?
Yeah, sometimes our managers aren't clear enough when they assign us a task to do. So for me, if I'm working with a manager that gives me a project, I want to be sure that I know all the expectations that the manager has for this project. I want to know the deadline, how much time I have to work on something's very important to me, and what they're expecting at the end of everything. Sometimes you're just given a piece of work to do, but you don't know the parameters or the situation around that task. So sometimes I just need a manager to be more clear with their instructions or explanations. What about you, Tom?
Well, I think sometimes they don't realize that you're working on lots of other stuff at the same time, and you're not just sitting at your desk twiddling your thumbs, waiting for an assignment. You might already have your plate pretty full. So, of course, when they come up to you and say, "Hey, can you write this report by the end of the day?" Sometimes they're not sensitive enough to the kinds of tasks that you already have assigned. So maybe that's a problem that you might mention to your supervisor in that performance review.
Yeah, that's important. Sometimes our bosses don't know that other people are asking us to do things for them as well. So that's a good piece of advice. So we're going to continue talking about performance reviews in our next program, guys. But for today, we're out of time. So we hope you'll come back for day 2. We're going to have a conversation between two people. And then again, talk about some useful expressions. For English Digest, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Tom. Goodbye.
See ya.